a wonderful, clear explanation of where you were at this one key moment in history that you gave this afternoon.
I felt like going on with them, but I thought I better limit myself in time-wise. The one was enough.
Well, we could have listened to you for a much longer time.
Oh, thank you. Even at that, I overran the time.
Oh no,
but
you
as Chairman said, you know, I have a reputation for doing that.
And I believe that you've been involved in another book more recently about Tibet. When was your last book, and can you tell us about it?
The idea came from doing an interview with Sam at the death of Tibet, you know, at the connivance of all the nations, you know, around about at the price of Tibet. So I see it, that there's no way out. The nations are prepared to connive with the United Nations in the suppression of what's happening in Tibet, you know, and don't know any explanation for it, but well, I do know an explanation for it, and that is a big power of politics, you know, and China and India. That the prime ministers of India have inherited Prime Minister Nehru's vision, and that was that he saw the future being with China and India. That if they did it, if they combined together, that they would form what he called the third stool of world politics. The Soviet group, the Western group, America, Britain and Europe, and China and India, a third side. So that, for the realization of that vision, he was prepared to, it needed the sacrifice of Tibet. So that's big power politics for you.
And at the same time, more recently, we've seen the triumph of people power in places like Egypt over authoritarian nations, and also inside Tibet and in exile. We've seen the Tibetans building a robust democracy, and we've seen Tibetans keeping the spirit of Tibet alive too. And do you feel that there is some hope in those things?
At this stage, I don't feel hope. My reason is that the Tibetans haven't discovered this question of intimidation. No, they're prepared to fight for their freedom, but that isn't enough inside Tibet. You know, that, you've got to be able to embarrass the big powers, and until they are prepared to do that, you know, embarrass the big powers. That's why I was so angry at the Dalai Lama coming to India. If he had stayed inside Tibet, he would have had a tremendous lever for the sympathy of the world, and he would continually have embarrassed China and India into getting Tibet its freedom, or at least give a chance of it. But once they came into India and accepted the terms of no politics, you know, not speaking of politics, it's dead, you know, and it's still dead, you know, there's no way. The youngsters, the nearest they came to it was when you had the youngsters parading and starving themselves, you know,
the hunger strikes, and then in
New
2008.
Yeah.
Right.
The Dalai Lama himself came and pled with them not to do it, you know, and because they recognised him, they gave it up. But they had to go on and maybe even die. And that's it. The thing that this whole thing started with the fellow the obscure person who died in Egypt. You know, the first uprising. It only needed one person to die. And so you need to have one person to die in a situation to evoke the response of others to follow and to support you. You've got to get one person to die in it. Don't, and too bad.
And from your your history and your stories, and I'm just wondering, because when we showed you the photograph this afternoon of Hermanta and Adrian and Lodi Gary, and that clearly brought back a lot of memories of that particular time. And was there any moment this afternoon that you particularly carried with you? Any sort of special moment that you can tell us about?
Yeah, well, that itself was a special moment, you know, with Adrian and Hermanta. Doing that film was outrageous, you know, at that time. I mean, in every way, I left my wife with £200, you know, and Adrian was the same. The three of us, we put our money into it because we couldn't get any backing, you know, for it. So it was a question of doing it. We were actually, or I was requested by two of the top Tibetan officials, the ones who had taken part in the original revolt discussions in Kham in 1954, when Dalai was coming back from Delhi. He met with khampa leaders. Two of these leaders came to see me in London at that time and asked about doing something else. I said, please do something. So the only way I could do it was to get Adrian agreed to go, and he knew this great cameraman, Chris Menges, and then they insisted that I go as well. I was going to get them to go. I said, well, I'm married now, I've got a child, and my days for that past. In any case, I don't think it'll do any good. But we finished it, and it had this worldwide acceptance, but it never did any good. You know, what use is 200 million people applauding you, you know, if it doesn't turn a wheel, you know. So that was my feeling that, okay, that nothing really can be done unless you get a Tibetan to die for the cause. If it died for the cause, then you're up and running, you know, you can do something again. But I'm 90.
But you received the Light of Truth Award as a symbolic representation of shedding light onto the struggle, and that film is a prime example of the way you told Tibetan stories and brought attention to that to the world.
Yeah, I think we did on that at that level, but I say at the revolutionary level, it didn't accomplish what we had hoped it would. You know, at a professional level, I think it was there weren't enough people killed, and the one person who died, the Tibetan who died, didn't die. You know, he was buried. I mean, I wasn't there when they buried him, but his two friends buried him under a pile of stones. And yet, you know, next day, 24 hours later, he follows us. He comes over the mountains, you know, to survive.
And this is one of the most amazing stories in your book, because he was shot, wasn't he?
He was
and
shot.
then everyone thought he was dead, and then he made it back to the camp. And you thought he was a ghost at first, returned from the dead. But then you were able to treat him, to provide medical treatment to him.
And he didn't need to come down to the hospitals in Kathmandu, and I was able to do enough for him there. But again, you see, it would have had that element of tragedy, you know, to do something more. You know, we must do something as poor man. Instead of which, they wanted to cut it out of the film because nobody would believe it. You know, you know, the big shots in BBC. We can't put that in because nobody will believe this, that it actually happened. If you say he was buried as if he was dead and he lived. So yeah, that's Tibet's tragedy, as far as I feel it.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah. Just again to sort of think back to your travels to Hong Kong many years ago, and your connection to the dialogue that began with Tibetan exiles and with the Chinese government. I wonder if you could perhaps clarify how you were involved in that.
I had this mysterious, well, it's not the friend I had that was the Chinese, the Indian journalist, and he invited me to a meal of which there was no suspicion. But when I went to him, he said that he said 2 Chinese wanted to meet me. So I said, what for? And he said, I didn't know. So I said, all right. So I met 2 Chinese in his flat. And to my astonishment, they said that they wanted to initiate a dialogue between the Dalai Lama and the Chinese. You know. And I said, but what authority do you have, you know, to speak for the Chinese? So they showed me their authority. They were who they said they were. So I said, all right, I'll see what can be done. So then I spoke to, who did I speak to? I can't remember anyway.
So it's Holiness.
I went to India and up to Dharamsala, and in the course of it, I met several Tibetans, including Kundaling, and Kundaling said that he would take it up, you know, with the Dalai Lama's representatives. And I said, but I need to know what it's all about. You know, is the Dalai Lama genuine? Is the Tibetan government genuine? Before I go back and tell the Chinese. So he came back and said yes, and he had been appointed, if the Chinese were sincere, immediate journalist, and he contacted the Chinese and said that it was genuine. And Kundaling Gucho came to Hong Kong, and I delivered them to a hotel, to a hotel and restaurant in Hong Kong, and left them to their discussions. I wasn't invited to the discussion, but I left them for that. So, but again, nothing came of it, and I said that, you know, my interpretation was that the Chinese were playing games, and that there was nothing serious in the development.
If His Holiness was here today, as you know, he's been working in exile tirelessly for his people. And I just wondered, given your historical experience over the last 50 years, 50, 60 years, longer, then what would you say to him if he was sitting here today, to His Holiness?
You know, I suspect he might be contemplating doing what I just said, but dying for the sake of the people, that he has withdrawn, you know, he's saying he's withdrawing. And that is good Tibetan practice, you know, when you're elderly, you prepare for the next stage of your existence, okay? So as the Dalai Lama, he is a stage lower than the Panchen Lama. Panchen Lama doesn't soil his hands with helping the poor and the dispossessed. The Dalai Lama, in doing so, doesn't jeopardize his entrance into nirvana, but he postpones it. As long as he's dealing with people and their problems and so on. So I mean, that's both his greatness, but also his weakness, because his insistence on non-violence means it can never be successful. As I said earlier, unless you die and prepare to die for it, you can never be successful. If you die, then you can do what they do in Egypt or anything else. You know, that is the necessary process. So I suspect that, having tried several things for 20 years, that he might be thinking that is a move his death would stimulate a whole lot of protests amongst Tibetans, as you know. But I think maybe as he's thinking that in his death, he might be able to precipitate the revolution that will help Tibet, without him participating in violence itself, you know. Because ironically, the death for a cause is not a perversion. You know, death for a cause is admired. You know, it's an admiration. It's the ultimate sacrifice of the individual for the cause. Is there. I know. I've been there. So I think that there may be a slight gleam of light for Tibet with his withdrawal from the position of the Dalai Lama, even though there's a lot of objection to it. But it's in the obscure realm of religion.
Okay, so we should close. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
George. It's been really a privilege and an honour to be here.
Well, you know, you too.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the trouble you've gone to. I didn't know it was going to be so wonderful when I started talking with you. Who are you, Kate Sanders?
That's right.